In this video, I'm going to be talking about how online groups are the spark. There's something to provide your digital community to actually not just watch your content, but actually experience it, which is a really important element of just experiences moving forward because of what the internet has done over the last 25 plus years, that people want to actually know what you believe and they want to try it out. I call this like try to buy. You see this in the marketplace a lot. You want to take the video course or 30 days free or whatever it is. In churches, one of our primary advantages is that there's all these hobbies and clubs like CrossFit or Peloton or whatever it is. But we as church leaders have something much better to offer. We have connection with God and connection with others, and ultimately all of community and clubs, social clubs, are kind of shadows of that. And so if we do online groups right, we can really nail it. And they're tremendous experiences as introductory types of offerings that people can, before they ever set foot on your property or in your house, wherever you're doing church, they can try out an online group. And so I believe online groups done right are just a tremendous resource. And so it's something you got to figure out. So in this video, I want to share a couple things about small groups, the 4 P's to kind of think about this, what a typical group looks like. And then, one kind of hack that I think is really a huge advantage, especially something we've done since all through COVID, to launch a bunch of groups. But before that, a quick kind of question from you is that next week I'm going to be doing a Q&A video completely answering your questions. So if you got a question about anything I've covered in this series, please drop it below. You can also shoot me a DM on Instagram or Twitter. I would love to answer your questions. And so comment below wherever you're watching this, or reply, or whatever. Send me your questions in before Sunday night, which is about 6 days away, so that I would love to just go through a bunch of questions in a long form. So I'm going to take a pause from this series and just kind of go through those questions. So comment below your questions. Would love to get to that. And if you've already made a question, I've already started to gather post comments and questions. So I got quite a few already. So with that, I want to jump into this. Something just as before we kind of jump into this, I did want to let you know that I do have 2 video courses, one for free and one paid, that I did with the Small Group Network. And both of these courses cover this topic in way more depth. The free one's great. The paid one is a little bit more updated, captured a little bit better. But I'll put links of both of those courses down below in the comment section or on my website, so that if you want to go through this a little bit more detailed, I'll point you in the right direction and kind of digest that content. So a couple things as we're kind of talking about this. One of the things that we really believe is that the Bible teaches is this concept of temple courts and house to house, that we're designed to kind of have large gatherings and small gatherings. And you see this kind of paradigm and method and rhythm kind of throughout the New Testament. Mainly, we see this start to be kind of concrete, kind of figured out in the book of Acts, Acts 2, 42 through 47, and then Acts 5, 42. And then later, Paul confirms this as well in his letters as he's writing to the early church. And we see a bunch of things kind of arise from this. We see there's teaching, which we would call discipleship. Paul says this to the Ephesians, and he really corrects them because there's some bad teaching going on from the occult. And he really drives in the importance of when you're gathered together to study something so you know what you believe. We also see that there was fellowship, that they met in houses and did life together. And this is why when Paul writes over and over again, he writes specifically to the Corinthians over and over again, you need to unite, because if you don't get along, if you don't have good communion with each other, you're not representing Jesus, and you're kind of missing the point. Second Corinthians says one of the ways we unite is we unite in our suffering, and we do things like the Lord's Supper. And so it's about good teaching. It's also about having good fellowship. There's also this idea of having serving together, having all things in common. James writes this in his letter, this idea that you need to get along with the Jewish people. This group of believers need to get along with the rich and the poor, that you need to not segment out different things, and you need to get along with each other, not having double-mindedness is kind of the word that's used. In Thessalonica, this was the idea there was divisions because of the second coming and all this end time type of preaching. And he was just saying, under all this persecution and bad thought, all this stuff is normal, but we need to relate to each other. We need to be together. We need to be united and be encouraged by each other. We see that they met at the temple courts. And this is the idea of that they didn't just come together in small groups, but they had large gatherings, mainly in houses. We see this all throughout Scripture. In Ephesus, the church started in a house. Priscilla and Aquila started the Corinth church in a house. We see Titus at the end of the end of Titus. It's a very small book, but they met in a house. That they got together and they worshipped together, sometimes in the temple courts and sometimes in a house. But they would worship together. Philippians says that this idea of encouraging to be citizens of a heavenly colony by growing in your commitments to serve God and one another. This idea that we are worshiping God no matter what is going on, and we're doing it in communion with one another. And then lastly, we see this idea of evangelism that they added to their numbers daily in Acts 4. Actually, it's in Acts 2. 42 through 47. And one of the great examples of this laid out in Paul's teaching is in Romans, that they were a group of both Jewish and Gentile Christians, and they were focused and really rallied on continuing to reach more people. And what I love about that is Rome is really far away from Israel, and they had this call, even being thousands of miles apart. They wanted to continue to grow. And so what you see here is that yes, the weekend for us, especially if I'm talking to a U.S. audience, we kind of think of church as this weekend type of experience. But most of how, we become known and heard is doing life with other people. I go to a big church, and I go on the weekend. But when I think about my church, I think of a couple of the couples that we're doing life with each other. We have a small group during the week. We have had kids around the same time. We've vacationed together. We've shared Airbnbs together. When I think of my church, I don't think of the big church automatically, but I think of my group, because that is who knows me. Yes, my pastor might know me, mainly me, because I'm on staff at this church, but he doesn't know everybody in this group, but we do know each other, and that's how we care and love for each other. This is why Scripture over and over again talks about this idea of division really messes up the church, because it ruins the core who we are. It represents Jesus wrong, and then if we're disconnected from each other, we're disconnected from God. It's the goal of our life here isn't to be necessarily holy by removing all distractions. If that was the case, then we need to go live in the desert away from everybody. No, God puts us around other people to challenge us, to make us better. This is the saying that God cares more about our character than our comfort. We are put around different types of people to make us more holy. And so we need to be with each other. And if I think about some of the highest moments of my life and the lowest moments, I think about my group. I think about the people that I've done life with. And so how do you need to offer an experience like that to your digital community in some way? And I believe that's really important. Depending on your ministry strategy, you can do more of it than others, but especially if you have a full-fledged online ministry, online groups is what's going to make it explode. Actually, right before I started recording this, I was on the phone with somebody that had some group questions, and they had a group that had people from France to the USA to another part of Asia, and they all meet online, and they had some questions about some things, and it was just really cool. It just reminds me how big our online community is and how powerful it is. And I told this person actually on the phone, I said, hey, I love that you're asking this question. And part of groups are, and this is what I said that you guys need to know each other and care for each other, because me as the pastor of this community, I can't care for everybody to the ability that I should or really can. But if you guys know each other and recommend good steps to each other, then that becomes sustainable. And the only way that I can have a thriving ministry is by having all these healthy groups. And so I love that she was asking me, like, what should I say here? And she was wondering if she was bugging me. And I was like, no, this is great, because this is the only way to scale this. And so online groups are really important, and it's a spark to actually build really robust a community. And I believe you could do this online in a lot of powerful ways. One thing before I kind of get into some of the strategy of online groups is I believe one of the easiest way to launch online groups is first to do a large group that you lead, or maybe a staff member or one of your core volunteers do. We started doing this through COVID, mainly because we had such a high demand of groups. Everybody wanted to get an online group, and we didn't have enough groups that were open to new people. Because most groups get started and they want to do it with their friends, and they're not really open to new people all the time. And so what we started to do was we started to say, hey, we're going to do this group over Zoom, and we're going to do it for 6 to 8 weeks on this topic. And, in this case, one of our pastors, our small group pastors, is going to lead it. And what we did was we're going to lead this, and it's going to be anywhere from 25 to 100 people is going to be part of this group. And we'd get all together on a Zoom call, and we would pick a study that's a little bit more friendly to new people, most likely a video study. And we would start together, watch the video portion on Zoom, share your screen for 10, 15 minutes. And then the pastor would come on and say, hey guys, now we're going to break off into breakout rooms, and we're going to be automatically broken off into groups of 5 people, depending the size of your group. You can get smaller or bigger or whatever. And then I want just have somebody in the group be the point person. Just point your fingers and whoever is the first. And then I'm going to post questions, and I want everybody to talk about this for the next 30 minutes. And then you use breakout rooms, and you do that. And then the host of the group can jump around into different groups. What's key about that on Zoom is you do need somebody to be a host and a co-host. I think if you're a host, you can't jump in the rooms, but the host can place a co-host into any room. I'll put a link to how to use breakout rooms down below. There's some really powerful tools there. But the key there is what you do is you do a large online group. You kind of teach them the paradigm for those 6 to 8 weeks. And maybe even during that week, you might start a Slack thread or a Facebook group so everybody in there can kind of interact during the week. And then at the end of it, you go, hey guys, we've been doing we've been doing an online group for the last 6 to 8 weeks. What if you continue on? And then what we've done is we've helped assimilate people who wanted to get an online group for those 6 to 8 weeks. And then we actually help launch groups out of that. And we found that that's one of the easiest ways to kind of teach what an online group is, because it's really foreign and different and people aren't comfortable with it. But by you doing it, you teach them what to do. And then what happens is we just say, hey, you can continue on with the group you've connected here, or do exactly what we did, but do it with your friends. And then what we found is people they catch the vision of it. So doing a large online group quarterly or twice a year or whatever, depending, it's a really helpful strategy. At the start of COVID, we actually did one every night. we had a bunch of volunteers and staff do one every night because we had 1,000 people interested in an online group. But obviously, as the interest as we move farther in and we help those people, we didn't need that many. But large online groups are a great way to kind of launch groups. And then if you get a story out of that, you can kind of use that story to continue to promote it. Maybe one group starts and you capture that moment and you tell that story to your community so that you can scale it. A couple of things I want to share is the 4 Ps of online groups. One is programming. Online groups tend to either watch on demand individually or real time in a group, or synchronized or asynchronized, meaning they will either all watch the video material or the read the book or whatever prior to group meeting. If you meet in a home, you might get all together and watch it or read it together. Sometimes in an online group, you want to jump straight to conversation. So some groups watch it on demand before, and then others watch it real time in a group. They'll share their screen and watch it. It doesn't matter. Groups do different things. I find most online groups watch it prior to meeting. I know for some people, they actually have questions based off the weekend message. So they'll say, hey, everybody, watch the weekend message. And then in group, we're going to have these 5 questions. I don't think it's ideal to use most of your group time to watch a video or to read. I don't think that's really good for discussion. And so I like on-demand individually, but some like to watch real time as a group. So programming, that's what they kind of do for the content. And then the next P is platform. People tend to be opinionated with technology. And so we don't really tell people how to meet. We recommend. We say, hey, Zoom is great, but if you have another platform, that's okay too. Zoom is the most sustainable. The thing with Zoom, it's really easy to join a group because of the one click. Other platforms like WhatsApp or Skype, some of these are getting better with every passing day, but you need to be in a contact list in order to kind of invite them, which can be messy. But Zoom, you can just send them a link. So platform-wise, we tend to recommend Zoom, but you can use whatever you desire. The next P is process. We also tend to strategically allow groups to meet however they want. They can meet as a text thread where they meet together and just text the questions. And then we encourage them to move to audio. Audio, we tend to encourage them to move to video. And then ultimately, we do have a strategy where we encourage them to meet face to face. So allow them to start anywhere they like. If they're younger, they might want to just text. If they're maybe not very tech savvy, they might want to just do audio based and just call each other or turn off their video. That's okay. But we do want to move them towards something better because, turning your video on does lead to better conversation. The same way as being in a room leads to better conversation. And so just be okay with how they meet. Maybe you don't want to start with text because that sounds so weird. That's okay. But have a strategy where maybe over a course of 2 years, you kind of slowly upgrade them. I have groups all the time that say, hey, Jay, thank you so much for letting me be part of an online group. I just want to let you know I'm going to start doing this face-to-face. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop engaging online. And they think it's a bad thing, but it's actually a really good thing. And then the last P is places. Online groups tend to interact in two main ways. They have a home base, and then they have a meeting space. And the home base is where they interact 24/7. This would be like a Facebook group, a text thread, or a WhatsApp group, or a WeChat type of conversation where they can kind of interact 24/7. This is whenever the group time isn't happening, they can kind of keep on top of each other. Like my small group, because we're here in the US, we primarily use iMessenger. We just kind of message each other. I know groups that use Slack. I know groups that have a Facebook group. I work with some people that I'm part of groups in WhatsApp, and depending on where you're at in the world, you can use different things, but have a home base, somewhere where you can kind of update and say, hey, group's happening, tomorrow, don't forget to read or watch or whatever. But this is where there's going to be a lot of interaction. I know some groups too that use Marco Polo, which is a video app. It's kind of different, but that can be a cool experience. And then meeting space is actually when you get together, how do you meet? Do you meet on Zoom or Skype or Google Hangouts or whatever it is, house party? It can be whatever platform. Most likely that's going to be like an audio or a video type of platform that's really easy to use. And then you would add those links into, you post it into the home base, or you would set up calendar appointments. And so think about the programming, the platform, the process, and the places. Those are the 4 Ps. And then lastly, I just want to talk about what a normal online group looks like. And again, I have those 2 video courses you can dive into in great detail about online groups. But a typical online group, honestly, it's not that much different than a typical small group or a Bible study where everybody gets together and everybody just says hi to each other. And the idea is you're trying to warm up everybody. You're trying to get you're just trying to give people time to log in. You're talking about something casual. People tend to be late to online groups. That's not uncommon, the same way as they're late to small groups and homes. And then you have like a warm-up question for the group. And this is kind of like an icebreaker. You're trying to, hey guys, how was your week? Or, you might have an icebreaker questions you Google. And the idea is you're trying to get everybody comfortable with turning on the video, unmuting, talking, sharing. Whenever I lead meetings on Zoom, I try to get something up front. I don't want to jump right to the meat of it, because if you do, then people don't feel comfortable. And the goal of a group is transformation, not information. We're not just trying to have one person talk. You're trying to have conversation because you're all learning from each other. And that's the goal. So you need to build that up front. You need to have that collective, everybody's engaging. So have some kind of fun question. And don't see it as distracting or delaying. See it as this gets kind of the blood going so everybody's actually in it. And then optionally, some groups watch the study together, or some have already watched it and they skip this, depending on where you're at. I would make sure if you're sharing a video, make sure you have good internet, and on Zoom, you select share video sound and optimize video so that it's a smooth picture when you share. And always test sharing your screen. One of the things I do is that I will, and I think you should do, if you're going to share your video on Zoom, prior to meeting, record your session and share your screen and see if it works smoothly on your internet. Hardline internet's always better. I think a lot of these meeting platforms are still getting good at actually offering up video services when you share your screen. It's still a little sloppy or choppy. It feels a little early 2000s internet-ish. But check it out. It should work smooth, but just check it out. And then next, after that, they would discuss the questions. Either you would break out in different rooms, or somebody would just go through the discussion questions. And then the key there is you're trying to get everybody talking. People can engage, and you're like, oh, what do you think about this from James? Or what do you think, Paul meant here? And you're just trying to get everybody to interact and share. And all the same things apply. If somebody's not talking, you let the talkers talk, and then you just call people out by name. If you get a sense that somebody's not talking for some other reason, maybe don't bug them, and afterwards you message them and say, hey, something's going on, but you're trying to get everybody engaged. And then a typical online group ends. The bulk of the meeting is actually that. It's going to be 30 to 45 minutes of just discussion, and then end on prayer requests. And then somebody in the group kind of writes them down and then posts those into the home-based conversation in Facebook or Slack or text message. And then end with prayer, ideally getting somebody else to pray. A big part of a group dynamic is getting a bunch of different people engaged in the process. So have somebody else open in prayer, have somebody else close in prayer. Make sure you have somebody else maybe comes up with the icebreaker. If you get more people engaged in the actual production of the group, it will lead to a better group experience. So I really do believe that online groups are a tremendous opportunity for your church to provide safe ways, no matter season of life, sickness, or security, that they can engage with you in a first way. The last thing I'll say here is that I know of a lot of ministries, that are doing things in the Muslim world, also in worlds, in spaces where there are heavy cult type of communities where they're not ready to leave their community and experience church yet, but they might watch your service online. They might join a Facebook group, and they might even experiment with an online group. And maybe the online group is the transformational moment where they decide, you know what, this is wrong, this is right, and a change is. Because it's when you're putting knowledge into practice. It's not just belief, but it's behavior. And they're actually testing it. And it's part of what Christianity is about. It's a part of following Jesus. It's not just all head, but it's heart. And groups are where you start to express that and live it out. And you try to actually see, do I actually believe this? And what does this mean? So provide digital ways for people to experience your church through a small group of Bible study. And I think you'll have tremendous success. So next week, we're going to pause this series. And if you haven't rewatched, start from the very beginning. But we're going to have a whole session dedicated to Q&A. So please leave me your question. I would love to spend some time answering it. Drop that in the comments. If you got any other feedback or thoughts, let me know. Also, check out those 2 video courses in the description, so that if you want to dive deeper into online groups, you can check out those 2 courses, the one free one and the paid one. But thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next week with your questions.